Hey MGTOWs, this is Vention. I was just watching a video from an interaction between Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan on his show, and basically he was talking. Yeah, these will work very well. He was talking about how. Jordan Peterson was talking about how polygamy is a bad situation for a society because they tend to become much more violent, and Joe Rogan was having a real hard time wrapping his brain around that, and I suspect it's because he was of the top 3% of men that all the women were chasing, right? And he just kept wanting to say that it was okay for society to be polygamous if that's what they want, so that guys like him could get laid unlimited amounts of times. And he just didn't seem to understand that in order for a society to function, there has to be something in it for everyone. Otherwise, it will not function, or at least it won't function as well. And he just didn't seem to understand. He couldn't wrap his brain around the situation that a lot of the guys who just can't get laid to save their lives are dealing with. And he just couldn't do it, and he was just saying, well, the solution is to man up and be more, improve yourself. And he's got a point, but the odds are stacked so far against younger men, like I was at one time, that they basically, they just look at what they would have to do to become attractive to women, and then they just say, well, shit, it's not worth the trouble. And on top of that, the deal between men and women has degenerated so far that it's just not worth the trouble, right? Society does not protect us if we come into conflict with a woman. But Jordan Peterson was trying to get him to understand that in order for a society to become peaceful and prosperous, you have to have some degree or a large degree of monogamy. And in order for people to buy in order for men to buy into society and really participate to their full ability, they have to be given a fair shake. And if they are not given that fair shake, the society will not benefit from their full participation. And you can see that in my own situation, where I live comfortably on 35% of my take-home pay, and I do not spend it. I don't work. I don't really put the money back into the economy to get everything continuing to pump along. Instead, I'm just taking that money, dumping it into Bitcoins, because I am of the opinion that, that is just it's government-proof money, and it's something that I really own. I mean, if I died and the backup keys were like lost, those bitcoins would be stuck in the blockchain until the last sun in the universe goes dark. So basically, society does not benefit as much as it could from me, because I have limited my participation in the society, and the result is society is less wealthy. And there's so many times when, if I had full participation, if I was really going, I would have worked a lot more overtime. I would have been a lot more productive than I have been. But as it is, I just I cut back my spending, and I'm way more frugal than I otherwise would be. And the result is society doesn't gain as much benefit from me as it would if I would have gotten a fair shake, right? If I could have expected to be treated fairly in a situation of divorce and all that, then I would have produced a lot more wealth, and society would have benefited from that wealth. But without that understanding of, without that expectation of being treated fairly, I limit my participation and live much more frugally, and the wealth that I created, the gifts that I could have given to society and, the world, were never given. So the result is society is vastly less wealthy than it otherwise would be. So I think I'll attach a little clip about, with Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson trying to make that freaking alpha Chad understand what is lost if men are unwilling to participate as much. And the result is, it's society suffers, and he doesn't seem to be able to wrap his brain around that. So I find that interesting. The guy, he's a very bright guy, but he has limitations.
You said one of the cures for this is enforced monogamy. Mm-hmm. People decided, and I had never heard that term before, quite honestly, and I was like, well, what the fuck does that mean? It's a psychological term, and what it means is enforced by culture, that it is a good value.
Monogamy, yeah, because
right.
Polygamous societies tend to become ultra-violent.
Yeah.
And that's been known in the anthropological literature for 100 years. And certainly leftist anthropologists were among those who discovered it. Like, the journalist knew perfectly well what I meant by enforced monogamy. She's not stupid.
You use it as if everybody would understand it because you're an intellectual and because you're a professor and this is what you do.
It was also 2 minutes out of a 2-day conversation.
Yes,
It's like, so it was something we just glanced over. Well, that was funny in some sense, because my sense is if you want to pillory someone, you should attribute to them views that someone somewhere has had. And the implication of that part of the New York Times article was that I wanted to, take nubile young women at the point of a gun under state enforcement and deliver them to useless men. It's like no one has ever believed that. So
but it sounds like that. It's the optics of that statement are very bad. But the question is, why wasn't there follow-up questions? And if there was follow-up questions to get you to define what you mean by enforced monogamy.
Well, there were. They just didn't make it into the piece.
Well, that's a real problem.
Yeah, it's a real problem.
That's a real problem because
it's so ridiculous. Because
it's an inaccurate definition of who you are.
Well, one of the things I've said continually, and this is on record in multiple places, it's like, okay, so you're a young man, and all the women are rejecting you. Who's got the problem? It's not all the women. That's a bad road to go down. If all the women are rejecting you, it's you.
We both agree on this, but why is enforced monogamy the solution for people that are involuntary celibates?
Well, it's the solution to the relationship between men and women. fundamentally is monogamous social
but these
norms.
men are unattractive. If these men are
the
unattractive,
solution to them.
But if these men are unattractive to women, I don't mean just physically unattractive. I mean women aren't seeking them as mates.
Mm-hmm.
They need to become men.
Yes, they certainly do.
This is
That's
what it
the
is.
solution.
That's the solution.
Absolutely,
and we
man.
both agree on this. So,
Yes, but they need to do that in a society where monogamy is the social norm.
But isn't
That's
it
all.
the social norm anyway?
Well, that was partly my point, although to the degree that we deviate from that, we tilt towards a more violent society. I was making a very minor point.
I don't think they're related, quite honestly. I don't think that involuntary celibates, I don't think that having enforced monogamy as a part of our cultural norm is going to help those people. I really don't.
It does.
How's it going to help them?
Well, because what happens is if a polygamous society develops, which is the alternative, then a small minority of men get all the women. That's what happens.
Oh, okay, I could see
that's
that.
That's the only point that I was making.
This theoretical world where polygamous societies exist en masse, and then you do have this problem where there's a small group of men that are fucking all the women. But that's not what we're talking about.
And also making the women unhappy, right? Because the women don't have any access to a genuine, intimate, one-to-one relationship over any long period of time.
Which
so
is what the women want. It's the whole idea is that
what's best
the women
for kids
want
too.
that. Right, sure, if you have children.
Right.
But I still don't think that is why these men are involuntary celibates. And I don't think it's the solution to that. I think the solution is that they need to become attractive to women.
Yes, that is the solution.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that.
I don't think the two are related.
Well, I was making a minor point. The minor point was that one of the ways that societies around the world have figured out that you keep young male aggression under control is by enforcing monogamous standards, because it gives everyone a chance in some sense. So that's the only point that I was making.
Meaning it clears more women will be available for one-on-one relationships rather than one guy who is some, whatever, for whatever reason, some large figure in society.
Yeah, well, you see this happening in universities where women outnumber men. So the men hypothetically have more sexual opportunity, but that isn't what happens. What happens is that a small minority of men have all the sexual opportunity. A fairly large minority of men don't. The women are unhappy because they can't find a committed relationship. It's bad for most of the men, and the men who have all the sexual opportunity get cynical.
But isn't this in some ways against your whole idea of equality of outcome? Because you're talking about equality of sexual outcome now. If these men, if you have a guy like a LeBron James that's a dominant basketball player that just kicks everyone's ass, this is a guy who succeeded at the highest level, right? Well, there's going to be people like that sexually. There's going to be people that are better at finding mates, and this is what they enjoy. They enjoy having many mates.
Yep,
they enjoy being, yes, but if this is what they enjoy, if it's a man who doesn't want a family and enjoys dating multiple women, why is that bad?
Well, I think the fundamental reason it's bad is because it's bad in the long run for children.
It's bad for children if he chooses to have children.
Yeah, well, that's it.
Sense.
But that's it. That's the fundamental issue as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And I think it's the answer. Look, to give the journalist credit, that is the point she was making. Apart from pillaring me and caricaturing my perspective, that was the point she was making. Well, first of all, I'm not in favor of unbridled hierarchies. Like I already said, that the proclivity of a hierarchy is that all the spoils go to the person at the top, and that can destabilize the whole structure.
Yes.
So we have to have a dialogue about how to rectify that.
But how could you possibly rectify that if one man is, like, say if we've got one 6'5" beautiful man who's got a perfect body and he's brilliant and he just wants to date a bunch of women, and all the rest of the people are 5'1" and they're fat and they're lazy, and like this guy's gonna. If this is the competition, he's going to win.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't get it. In order for, even though he is like the ultra alpha who gets all these women, he still exists within a society. And in order for that society to prosper, you need to have buy-in from the vast majority of the men. And if they don't buy in, the society is more violent, less stable, far less prosperous, because men don't have any, and less safe, because men don't have to care about society because they're not raising any kids or any family there. And we are overtaxed because government is trying to support all of the baby mamas and all the babies from the Chads, and taxing the shit out of us to do that. And so we throttle back our spending, throttle back our productivity, make it so that there's less to tax, and live in a tiny house somewhere or a small room somewhere and just don't participate. And when we're walking down the street and we see crime or whatever, we don't have any dog in that fight, so we just keep walking. And one of those crimes could be somebody slashing the tires on the Chad's car in order for the Chads to have a good life, a good stable life for their whoring around. They're going to need buy-in from those who are not as wealthy as they are in looks and money and status. And if we don't get that buy-in, the society will not function, and they will be less, and basically the whole thing could implode. And generally, historically, that would end with one country invading another and wiping out all of us and the Chads, and taking all the women as slaves and whatnot, and starting the society over. So yeah, he needs to get a clue, but he just does not have it.
Yep.
There's no way around this. And even if you decide to have enforced monogamy, where it becomes a popular thing, the women are going to be more drawn to him if he chooses to date them. They might decide, I would rather have him sometimes than never at all.
That is actually what does happen.
But what is wrong with that?
Well, what's wrong with it is that it destabilizes society and it's bad for children.
Right, you said that.
Yeah, but
what if they don't want to have children? But there's a lot of people that don't want to have children. There's a lot of people that choose to go their entire life without having children. There's men in their 30s. Some of my friends have vasectomies. They don't want children.
Mm-hmm.
So why would that help in any way, these involuntary celibates?
Yeah, this, I would go to work, and once I got to work and pulled into the parking lot, I would notice that I had a nice little cloud of smoke coming from underneath my hood, which was pretty disquieting. So I eventually traced it to a leaky valve cover gasket. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of this. A little bit of camshaft damage. Can't feel it with my thumbnail though. Wish I could use one of the solvent tanks at work for this. But unfortunately, I'll work with what I've got. And a good example of these polygamous societies are the Muslim societies in the Middle Ages, where the sultans would have like 400 wives, and then regular working class guys didn't have any. So there was like a tremendous demand for women. a tremendous market for them, and the result was massive profit-driven raids of Muslim slavers. They just descended on Europe and just totally obliterated a lot of the coastal areas, and whole sections of like the coast of France had to be abandoned until enough warfare was developed, war technology, castles and knights and armor and all that stuff, in order to repel the invaders. But there was like 1,000 years or more of that horrendous brutality, and it was all driven by polygamy. And the result is a shitty environment at home. Everybody's at each other's throats, and then massive brutality overseas. And it was just a real shitty situation. Whereas if you look at the monogamous societies, they actually had a pretty decent deal, and guys had something to defend, so they basically were part of society, and we and then they backed up society, and they fought for society, their civilization, and they were willing to, they had buy-in, whereas, and I suspect that's something that hadn't really been seen on a wide scale, and it's one of the things that made the monogamous Western societies so formidable. It's because they had buy-in from their men all the way across the entire economic spectrum. So yeah, that's, and nope, I'm just gonna have to run this thing through the parts washer at work before I can really get it as clean as I want to. So I think I will stop right here and finish the job tomorrow after work. But in closing, Joe Rogan just doesn't get it. In order for a society to function well and be prosperous so that he can whore around with all of his hundreds of women that are all after him, in order for that much prosperity to occur, you have to have buy-in from the majority of men. And in order to do that, they need to get a fair shake. The family court can't be set up to screw them over horrendously. And so basically, what can't go on anymore generally won't. And society is going to change. And guys like this are going to have to get a clue because we are Atlas, and we are no longer supporting this society, and that's just too bad. What can I say? And don't get married.